Hi everyone. Today I'm speaking with Peter Hefele, who is a policy director of Wilfried Center for European Studies. Hi, Peter.
Hello, Max. Good morning. Good to see you.
Thanks, Peter. Would you like to say several words about what you're doing?
Sure. Well, the Wilfried Martin Center for European Studies is the official think tank of the European People's Party. That's the largest party family, the conservative liberal party family in the European Parliament. And as a policy director in charge of coordinating all these different policy fields from defense and security policy to economic policy, but also digitalization and climate change issues, for example. So this is a vast range of topics, and we have roughly 40 member foundations all over Europe, and as well strong transatlantic relations.
I see. Thanks, Peter, for your introduction. And so, Peter, I have several questions about Ukraine. It would be great to hear your opinion. So I will start with my first question. What's your view on the recent developments in Ukraine?
Well, Ukraine is one of the biggest topics here in Brussels as well. The last visit of the Commission, I think, was a clear signal how politically important the future of Ukraine, not only for the Ukraine itself, but also for the whole European project is. And I'm quite sure that this will maintain, that the political issues remains. But of course, the concerns are there as well. And as we're now hearing more and more news about a new Russian offensive in the springtime, so we are very concerned, and we have really to speed up our efforts, both militarily as well as in civilian part, to support Ukraine in this fight, which is, as I said, not only a fight by the Ukrainians for Ukraine, but it's Ukraine is fighting for Europe.
Right. And in terms of this support, and you mentioned this potential upcoming offensive, how do you think Ukraine can speed up this support from the West? And what do you think overall about this support Ukraine has received so far?
Well, in many ways it was not enough, and it was too late to a certain extent. And frankly speaking, with the massive support by the United States, your country had not survived. Europe contributed, but it could have done more. Well, as a German, I don't have to tell you that I'm not very satisfied with this slow progress we made in supporting Ukraine also on the military side. But the military support itself is not alone enough. We need a strong civil component. Well, Russia is systematically, of course, destroying also the basics, the fundamentals of the statehood of Ukraine. So we have to invest in infrastructure, in training people, in supporting and broadening the support from the Western countries to Ukraine, be it in the education sector, be it in the local administration. I think there's a lot of opportunities to deepen these networks, and this is very important for the whole reconstruction period, which we will hopefully soon see.
And do you think there is some room for improvement, training some military personnel as well? There's been some things done, right?
The Commission or the European nations have now promised to increase and enhance this training programs, increasing the number at least, but this is definitely not enough. Ukraine will be sooner or later an integral part of the European security architecture. So it is not about just immediate measures, but we have to see how this will contribute to the integration in our security structure, mainly the NATO, but I think the EU component is getting stronger and stronger. And on the other side, this is a great opportunity for Europe itself to improve the coordinating mechanisms from the tactical level to the procurement, for example. This hopefully gives Europe a big push towards a more integrated defense union.
I see. And do you think there is some room for improvement of getting more advice from military experts as well? Or do you think
I think there's a lot of things already underway, but it takes time, and it's complex systems, the modern weapon technology, and it is indeed also building up our own capacities. It was quite shocking that we had not enough resources in terms of ammunition, for example. We had dramatically reduced our own capacities after 1990. So we are now restarting the engine, and that takes time. It's an issue not of weeks and months, it's of years. And it's not only about the financial resources, which are also limited, but it's about the whole infrastructure. The mental issue is very important. Mentality has to change. And this is something which doesn't happen from today to tomorrow. This takes time, and it's Western European societies are not used, I think, to this kind of thinking. They had thought that these kind of wars have gone, that there's a era of eternal peace. Unfortunately, had we lived and looked outside Europe, we had realized that it was never the case, and that we had been in a very short window in history where we had this opportunity. Now we have to learn it the hard way. It's very sad, but that's a matter of fact.
That was like a quiet before storm, this like 25 years or so.
The storms had already been out there. I lived 15 years in and with Asia, and this region had never been without conflicts. It's an ongoing conflict many times, and hasn't stopped, and will be even more severe, I think, in the future beyond the current Ukraine crisis.
And don't you think Russia has now this initiative because it actually has been built, has kept this Soviet heritage, this armaments and equipment, and it has more military force, and it can step up efforts. And actually, there is a high risk if Western support is not secured before this spring offensive. We are in trouble as Ukraine.
That is true. It's a matter of time, and this is what Putin is, I think, counting into his strategy. On the long run, I'm less concerned, because if we really manage to step up our resources, of course, the West is superior. That is a matter of fact. And of course, this is something we have to maintain. This fatigue that we had been fed up with supporting, and it will last, but we have now realized that is a longer war than we expected. It is not over within months. And this is part of a larger strategic confrontation. And that is what I mentioned in the beginning. We have to see how it will shape the future security architecture of Europe. And this will be totally different from what we have thought, even in Cold War times. And it is only one field of confrontation and conflict. The other I mentioned is definitely in Asia Pacific.
Yeah, I see. And don't you think that Russia can escalate it further militarily? They keep threatening about the use of tactical nuclear weapons. I mean, if they're going to lose, they keep using this rhetoric that they will resort to this last protection of their sovereignty.
Well, one cannot exclude this, but I think the West has made quite clear that this is a red tape which Russia should not use. But even before, there's unfortunately enough opportunities in the conventional warfare which had not been exploited. So it is definitely important to maintain, to upgrade, to modernize Ukraine forces. And this takes not only weeks and months. We have to see that we enter a new phase of confrontation. And this is something which will, as I mentioned, completely reshape the European thinking in security, and of course the underlying architecture.
Yeah, and do you think that that they will continue attacking in energy infrastructure, civilian infrastructure? It seems like they do it on average every 2 weeks, right?
Well, this is, as we said, a total war. So there's no differentiation between military target and civilian target. That is, as modern warfare unfortunately mostly is. It's total. They're destroying the fundamentals of the society. And so we have to defend and help defend Ukraine society to survive.
Right, right. So and my last question about this, so what do you see as the highest risk for Ukraine, and how can it counteract this risk?
Well, first, it has to withstand the very probable offense. then we have to avoid that some of the Western countries will be willing to get too early to the whatever the negotiation table might be, the very end, because there are forces, in particular in the larger Western European countries, who want to make any kind of deal, any kind of peace. And I have to quote this because it will not be a peace in our understanding as long as we are not able to overcome the source of aggression, and that means the thinking of imperial Russia. There will be no peace in our understanding. That will be a protracted war, a frozen conflict at its best, as we have seen since 2014, but it's definitely not a long-lasting, sustainable security architecture in Europe, which we have thought after 1990. So we have to realize that we will be up to a long-lasting conflict. And this is not only an issue Ukraine is facing, that is something which affects all of us. Whether there might be a change in Russia, which is a precondition for any different solution, I cannot predict. We still hope that there might be changes, but for the moment, the motives and the source of aggression in this conflict. So we have to contain and to hedge this conflict.
Peter, but even if the regime is toppled or disintegrated from inside, don't you think that Putin will be easily replaced and they will continue doing things as before? Because it seems like they have this built-in structure of these FSB people controlling military and the whole terror. It seems like it's never going away unless it's been totally dismantled, right, and democratized again, right?
Well, I sometimes try to compare this with the situation in Germany, is both after the First World War and after the Second World War. After the First World War, and this is a situation which is a bit similar, I think, to the current Russian situation. Germany had not been able to manage to democratize the society, to get rid of the old elites who had still been complaining the loss of the war and the loss of the big empire, and by this creating the fundaments for the next aggression. Totally different after 1945, where the German society underwent a dramatic change. We get rid of this old imperialistic thinking we had been willing to integrate into the Western community. Unless the Russian society is not willing to go this way, I'm very pessimistic in this respect, because the sources of the thinking, the mentality itself remains, and will take each and every opportunity to restart.
To reemerge, right? But even if, I mean, if there is a transition and Russia withdraw troops, so probably it will be important to overcome these years of brainwashing and propaganda imposed on the Russians, because it seems like that lots of them really believe that the president is doing the right thing, yeah? Defending Russia.
Absolutely. And that is it's a more fundamental question we have in many other countries of what we call regime change or transformation. In most cases, one must admit these efforts fail, because it takes at least 1 to 2 generations to completely change. And as you mentioned, the old power structures remain intact, and they will, of course, always try to regain power. So this is one of the biggest challenges, transforming societies, and also the question, how can we support this from outside, which we have a lot of examples where it failed. Look to the Middle East, where we tried to do these famous regime changes, and well, the outcome is less pleasant.
Yeah, so basically without transformation of domestic policies, there will be always this threat of authoritarian regimes attacking democracies and free world, right?
Nonetheless, I think that Western Europe or Europe is willing to open again to a Russian society which has changed or is willing to change. But for the moment, I don't see many options.
So So how do you see the situation developing, roughly speaking, for Ukraine, to sum it up?
Well, we have to maintain, and that means the North Atlantic community has to support, to strengthen up, to see exactly where the needs are. We have to speed up. We have to improve the integration of the tactical, the operational, the strategic level very much. We have to maintain the sanctions or even improve, because there are a lot of loopholes which have not been closed. We have to strengthen our own resilience. That means we have to transform our energy systems, for example, which is one of the most vulnerable parts. And Putin is exploiting it, of course, very cleverly. So we have to continue with our own transformation to get rid of these vulnerabilities. Then, of course, restarting our economic engines to do our homework in many ways, and of course to think about how a future Europe looks like, because sooner or later Ukraine will be part of the European Union, but how it looks like, how the enlargement process should be done, is big issues which go beyond Ukraine. This is a question for the constitution of Europe. And Ukraine is not the only country waiting. Look to the Western Balkans, look to Georgia maybe in the future. So these are very fundamental questions on the constitution of Europe.
So you mentioned several times Ukraine becoming a part of Europe. So if the war is over and the territories are returned, that's the only way for Ukraine to integrate with Europe and realize it's also Euro-Atlantic aspirations, right? Because no one will integrate a country with a territorial dispute, right now.
But this is an issue of what criteria we set up, whether it is the way we did it in the past, and there are very high standards, or are there different forms of affiliating. I think this, as I mentioned, is an issue which is not only to be debated in the case of Ukraine, it goes for the other countries as well. We have to find new ways. This is a discussion we are a bit shying away here in Brussels to see whether there are alternative forms of affiliation, integration, because we cannot do it what we have done to the Balkans, to wait for 10, 15 years. That definitely doesn't work. We cannot leave Ukraine in this in-between something. There must be a clear decision that Ukraine is part and has to become part of Europe's, not only security architectures, also economic unity, and of course the integration of the societies.
But also this is important to monitor, for example, lots of financial aid, right? Europe provides so much, and there have been some issues with transparency and accountability, right, with this aid.
Well, we didn't talk about the challenges within Ukraine and within Ukrainian society, but this is absolutely crucial in maintaining the support, because we have seen these several cases in the past of corruption. Reforming, upgrading standards, modern governance is absolutely crucial. Otherwise, the support, the willing to support, is really lowering on the long term. And we are well aware of what amounts of money we are talking about to reconstruct and to modernize and to integrate your country into Western and European structures.
And do you think that Zelensky's leadership has been efficient in light of the war?
This is, well, in times of war, definitely he is a great leader. But as soon as we are back to kind of normality, whatever this means, so there will be political fights, definitely. There are different opinions how to proceed, different forces. That is one of the most sensitive and most dangerous fields, I think, in the future. And Europe has to have a very close eye on that as well.
Sure, I see. So Peter, and do you think I covered everything by my questions, or you would like to add something as a final word about Ukraine?
No, well, I think as I see it in Brussels, the support is definitely there, and your people do a great job in promoting the case of Ukraine. That is really impressive. It's a new generation, also a lot of women who really stand for and with it. And well, I must really acknowledge that I had never expected that, and it's something which we should really take as a something we should look up to it, also in defending our own liberties and our own freedom, which we for too long, I think, have taken as given, is, as we see now, not the case. So we have to fight for that every day. And there's not only external challenges and threats, it's also from our societies, from within our societies. And so this is something, it's a wake-up call to really fight for what our ancestors have fight for. And we only inherited to some extent, but not willing to stabilize, to further develop. So the Ukraine was, as catastrophic as the situation is, definitely a wake-up call to renew the value of liberty and freedom.
Reawaken this feeling of democracy and liberty, right?
Yep.
All right, Peter, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Max, it was a great pleasure. I wish you all the best. And, well, let's stay in contact.